Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this video that I thought was very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video, I believe, by the boxing channel known as AKHi TV. And AKHi TV and Dante's Boxing Nation, they're going to have one of their reporters I believe, ask Derek James a series of questions about the up-and-coming Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo fight. It isn't a very long video. I just thought that I would kind of talk on it because I thought that it was very particularly interesting, because there is a certain amount of people talking about the quote-unquote size difference, whether it be within Canelo Alvarez's advantage or that of Jermell Charlo's advantage. And I just thought that I would kind of talk about it. Not only that, but of course he's also going to be talking about the possibility of there being a Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. rematch, which I believe more than likely is going to happen, but we'll see what ends up happening. Anyways, let's see what the man has to say.
I'm with one of the greatest coaches, boxing trainers that ever lived, and he's still doing this thing, Derek James. Derek, how are you doing, first of all, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
All right, how would you compare Canelo's style to Castano?
Similar, but more intelligence, more power. Very similar.
Canelo said,
Well, just to talk about that really quickly, when we talk about Canelo Alvarez versus Brian Castano, I think the only thing that those two really have in common is that they both speak Spanish and that they at times can be pressure fighters. When you talk about Canelo Alvarez, he's a lot better as a counter puncher. When it comes down to it, Brian Castano, in my view, is not an elite counter puncher. He's another one of these guys that is a great pressure fighter, and he's a guy that's a great athlete, but he's not a particularly great counter puncher. And he's a guy that, to be quite honest with you, once it appeared that Jermell Charlo was able to break through the mold a little bit, it appeared that he did not really have a plan B. Canelo Alvarez is a fighter, once again, that in my view is truly an all-time great level fighter. Now, this fight is going to be very particularly interesting because this is either going to end the career of Canelo Alvarez or it's going to end the career of Mr. Jermell Charlo, because whoever loses this fight, they're never going to be the same again. And I've already stated this, Canelo Alvarez, in my view, you can still tell that he's an A-grade level fighter, and you can still tell that right now he probably is the face of boxing. But both of those things are dwindling. They are on the downslide. Canelo Alvarez, even though he's only 33 years old, certain fighters don't age the same. And it's very clear that, in my view, that Canelo Alvarez has lost some of that speed. He has lost even a little bit more stamina than what he had before. And Canelo's never been great in terms of having a great gas tank. Usually, when it came down to it, although he did improve his pacing and his stamina a little bit, some people may allege that that's due to other factors, but I'll just leave it at that. It is what it is. But Canelo, according to what I've seen, just in my personal view, especially in the John Ryder fight, it's very clear that Canelo Alvarez has lost a step. Now, he's still a very good fighter, and even with his skill set, he's one of the top 10, the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters on the planet. But this is going to be a fight that Canelo Alvarez has to take very seriously. Do I believe that Jermell Charlo is as skilled as what Canelo Alvarez is? No. But at the end of the day, once again, his speed is not going to be the same in this fight. Jermell Charlo always comes in his fights very motivated. Now, I do believe more than likely that Jermell Charlo is taking this possibly for the paycheck. But we'll see overall what ends up happening. Like I said, Canelo Alvarez, he is going to have to take this fight very seriously, because if he ends up losing this, that pretty much is the rest of his career. He's not ever going to be the same after that. And trust me, Jermell Charlo, more than likely, whether he wins or loses, he's probably not going to be the same. That's if Canelo Alvarez puts on a relatively good performance, though. Like I said, the only way that I see Canelo Alvarez losing this fight is if he barely throws anything and if he just looks like a complete shell of himself. That's really the only way that I see Canelo Alvarez losing this fight. Because even in the John Ryder fight, and even in a couple of the fights prior, I thought that he still looked somewhat relatively A-grade. But if he ends up losing this fight, especially in 8 rounds to 4, losing this fight in general, that will show me that he no longer is on the A-grade level. And certain people will say, well, is that not giving Jermell Charlo enough credit? Because Jermell Charlo he is an A-grade level fighter, and he is an A-grade level fighter. But Jermell Charlo has had a certain amount of problems with certain other fighters in the past, including not certain A-grade level fighters like that of Tony Harrison. And Canelo Alvarez, just with the level of competition that I've seen him beat throughout his career and what he's done, and to be quite honest with you, probably decently better fighters or more skilled or more challenging contenders than that of Jermell Charlo. If Canelo Alvarez actually loses this fight to Jermell Charlo, that would tell me that he pretty much has nothing left within that of his boxing career. But I do expect Canelo Alvarez more than likely to win this fight at a minimum 8 rounds to 4. Canelo really should win this fight probably about 11 rounds to 1, or 10 rounds, excuse me, anywhere from 11 rounds to 1 or 9 rounds to 3. That's where he should win it, even with him being dropped off a little bit. But we'll see.
Everybody from 147 to 154 is bigger than him. What determines who's bigger? The height, the natural weight? Because Charlo is taller than Mike Tyson, and Tyson fought at heavyweight, yeah.
I think that his physique and he's a bigger guy, but I mean, Canelo just is heavier. He's a bigger, we talk about body mass and size. I think that's more than anything what we're talking about.
So what's your thoughts on when you hear some reporters say Charlo is way bigger than Canelo just because he's taller?
I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think that it's all about the Canelo's skill set, Charlo's skill set, what they both bring to the table, what they can both take away from each other. That's the key element.
Switch gears a little bit. How's Errol Spence Jr.?
Anyways, just to talk about that, and just to talk about the quote-unquote size advantage that either fighter could have, Canelo Alvarez more than likely is going to have the size advantage going into this fight. Obviously, he's the fighter at 168 pounds. Now, is he a natural 168-pounder? No, he's not. And like I said, with these channels, the LDBC and the media channels, it's very peculiar, once again, how they love to say all these things about how, Canelo losing to Dimitri Bivol, he just got outclassed. Don't use the size excuse, or when it comes to Lomachenko, Devin Haney, certain fighters that they don't like. But then when it comes to Fury, Deontay Wilder, or, Canelo versus Jermell Charlo, these are the same guys. AKHi TV is the same genius that said that, let's put Lomachenko in the same ring with Terrence Bud Crawford. He's that good. Let's put Lomachenko, who's basically a natural 130-pounder, in the ring with a natural welterweight. That's what he said. All right? But, keep in mind when it comes to this fight, they say, Jermell Charlo, he's moving up 2 weight classes, so we really can't give Canelo Alvarez that much credit, even though Canelo, once again, he's not really a natural 168-pounder. Now, is he going to have the size advantage in this fight? Yes, because he has been fighting at 168 pounds for longer. And Canelo, he's a decently, girthy guy. He's a guy that, once again, he's a little bit thicker than, probably most 154 to 160 pounders. But is he any bigger than that of a lot of middleweights? No, not really. When you take a look at Canelo Alvarez compared to that of Danny Jacobs or Gennady Golovkin or Jermell Charlo or Demetrius Boo Andrade, all those guys are bigger than him. Some of those guys are even girthier than what he is. So I don't think a lot of people truly understand, especially from these channels, or they just try to spread a certain amount of the narratives and pretend that they don't understand, how truly skilled that Canelo Alvarez has to be to accomplish what he's accomplished in his career. The man is a dude that has about a 71 to 72 inch reach at the most, and on top of that, he's about 5'8", I believe, which is his official height. And the man was able to win official titles from 154 all the way to light heavyweight. That's not something that a lot of fighters can do, and it's not like he was built like Roy Jones Jr. or Bernard Hopkins or Joe Calzaghe, where he's around 5'11" or 6 foot and has anywhere from a 74 to 76 arm reach. Once again, dude, Canelo Alvarez, he's built like some 154-pounders.
Doing? Have you seen him since the Crawford loss?
No, I haven't talked to him because I haven't seen him. I talked to him.
Right.
I've been out the country in New York, so I haven't been here. We haven't been around each other.
Do you want the rematch with Crawford next for Errol?
I want him if that's what he wants, because I heard that's what he wants, I want it for him.
What improvements can Errol Spence make in a rematch?
He said if that's what he wants. I wonder if Derrick James, and perhaps this is the right mindset, but I wonder if there's a part of him that does not want that rematch to happen. Maybe he personally believes that Errol Spence is not ready for it, but, You know what? To be honest with you, I think that that's, probably the right mindset to say, well, we'll see where Errol Spence is ready. Now, in my view, of course, I'm not a professional boxing trainer. If I were Derek James, I would say, well, let's try to take a couple fights at 154. That way we can kind of get within the title picture. On top of that, we can get, a fresh new mindset, work on some new skills, and then, we'll rematch him and we'll have, even a better chance within that of the rematch. But, I understand that a lot of fighters, of course, they want the immediate rematch. Personally, do I believe that is going to end up much different? Probably not, but we'll see.
That's with Crawford.
I mean, I think we won't talk about it because if that be the case, I mean, yeah, we won't talk about it.
All right, they out here protesting. I see. Let me ask you something real quick. Did Crawford do anything that impressed you or surprised you against Errol Spence?
No comment.
Okay. You were.
No comment. The man asked him overall, did Crawford do anything overall against your fighter, that ended up impressing you? And he said no comment. Basically, what that translates to is a big fat whopping yes. Absolutely. And he might also be saying that once again because he may not want to give Terrence Bud Crawford's side an advantage mentally in the rematch. And I can perfectly understand that. But listen, at the end of the day, if you're Derek James, if you're anyone in Errol Spence's corner, you have to be somewhat relatively, impressed with what Terrence Bud Crawford did. I mean, his defense, we already knew that he was going to have the quicker feet. We already knew more than likely that his hand speed was going to be above that of Errol Spence Jr.'s, and even the slight head movement. What I did not expect, once again, was the power to be on that level, his defense to be much more improved. Even though I kind of expected his defense to be better, I didn't think it was going to be quite that sharp. But I think the main factor that really was the most surprising is just the level of power. I mean, once again, Terrence Bud Crawford, everyone in that fight, including myself, was saying that Errol Spence was more than likely going to be the more powerful guy. Now, maybe it was just because Terrence was that slick and he wasn't getting hit as often, and maybe because he was just always a better counterpuncher, but it looked like Terrence Bud Crawford was even more powerful than Errol Spence Jr. It looked like had they got in a slugging match, even if they just, played one of those slapping contests within that of the UFC, where they didn't avoid any punches. They just, were taking punches mano a mano. It looked like Terrence Bud Crawford was the more powerful puncher.
With Anthony Joshua,
Yeah.
for 2 fights. How confident are you that AJ can take away Wilder's right hand when they do fight? And is Wilder's right hand all he has to worry about?
No, I think Wilder's a great fighter. He has good power. He has a lot of good. He's working with Malik enhanced his boxing skill. So he'll be a totally different fighter by the time we fight him. So we'll see what he can do.
Hey, as always, Mr. James, thank you.
That's going to be very interesting to see if that AJ Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder fight is going to happen. It's going to be very interesting, especially if AJ Anthony Joshua wants that fight. And I was never a big fan of the AJ Anthony Joshua was avoiding Wilder comments in the past because there were times where Wilder did not seem always super serious about fighting AJ Anthony Joshua either. But the reason why I say that is because Anthony Joshua could retire today without even possibly facing Deontay Wilder and be remembered as the better fighter of the two for the generation. Because whether people want to admit it or not, whether you think, whichever man would have won depending on their prime, AJ Anthony Joshua has the way better resume and accomplishments within his career. And people can like that, they can not like that, it just is what it is. At the end of the day, AJ Anthony Joshua has Joseph Parker, he has Dillian White, Andrew Ruiz, he has, let me think, Charles Martin, if you want to include him, Alexander Povetkin, Vladimir Klitschko, that's not even naming some of the other names that I'm not mentioning. Carlos Takam, he has all those names on his resume, and he beat all those guys. Now, of course, he lost to Andrew Ruiz one point in time, and lost to Alexander Usyk, but it's no offense against Deontay Wilder, but if he ended up retiring today, can we really call him one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time? I mean, you can call him, a Hall of Famer. you can say that Deontay Wilder was an A-grade fighter once upon a time, and I'm not saying that AJ Anthony Joshua would necessarily be one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time, but like, who exactly has Deontay Wilder ever beaten in his career? I mean, really, when we talk about his title defenses, it's no offense, but people love to talk about Inoue or some of these other guys fighting weaker competition, and I tend to, agree with some of those statements, at least with Inoue's past, before that of Steven Fulton and Emmanuel Rodriguez, but you want to take a look at weak competition, take a look at Deontay Wilder. I mean, during his 10, title defenses, like, who the fuck did that man ever fight? I mean, you're talking about Johan Duapas and, I mean, maybe that was before, I can't remember, Bermain Stavern and, and, Chris Areola when he was already washed up, and he was always a fat fuck, as harsh as it is throughout his career anyway, very undisciplined. It's like who the hell else did he ever really face besides that of Luis Ortiz? He has one top contender, a guy who was never even able to capture a belt within the heavyweight division anyway. So it's like, it's no offense against Wilder, but his resume needs some work. That's why that AJ Anthony Joshua fight, it'd really be very vital for both of them. But in terms of talking about who do I believe would win the fight, I would have to go with Deontay Wilder, at least as of recent, with what I've been seeing. And it isn't that Anthony Joshua, in my view, in certain regards, is now more skilled than Wilder. In certain regards, when both of them are at their best, I think that Anthony Joshua probably has the straighter punches. And on top of that, I would say that he has, at least as an individual all-around skilled fighter, maybe the slightly higher boxing IQ. But I don't know if that's really going to translate well, because it isn't that AJ is really an exceptional fighter. I would say that he was an A-grade fighter at his best. But after those two losses to Alexander Usyk, he does still look a little bit mentally rattled. I'm not really quite sure how ready he is going to be. And one thing about Wilder that I know, a lot like George Foreman, he's going to have a lot of confidence in his ability, in his power. And Deontay Wilder is not going to stop throwing. So there's going to be moments where Anthony Joshua, once again, like I said, within that most recent fight review, he's going to have to put everything together. And there's going to be times where he is going to have to try to knock, Deontay Wilder back or push him back, and where the moment is not too big for him. So we'll see what ends up happening. But if that fight were to happen next, I would probably have to go with that of Deontay Wilder by knockout, probably within the first 6 rounds, or sometime within the fight. Once again, AJ can possibly win that fight, but he needs some more work. And even after that, I'm not too confident about him possibly defeating Deontay Wilder. So we'll see. But AJ Anthony Joshua, he needs a couple more fights. I would love to see him in the ring with Dillian White in the rematch. Of course, we all know that White got popped for steroids for the second time in his career. So we'll see what ends up happening about that. But we'll see. But anyways, very interesting interview. Kind of mentioned 3 of the things that I found very interesting as of late. The Canelo fight, the Terrence Bud Crawford fight, and of course the possible AJ versus Wilder fight. I don't think that fight is going to happen next, but, we'll see. Hopefully within a year. We'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.